Well, to discuss some of the issues arising, former president of the Nigerian Institute of Structural Engineers, Eddy Atumonyogo, joins us from our Lagos studios. And we'll bring in Mr. Toyo in a couple of moments, Mr. Eddy in a couple of moments. But, you know, Indy, just looking at what has happened in Lagos, we do know that another building has collapsed barely 24 hours after the Ikoyi incident, this time around in Osakwa, London. Lekki area of Lagos. Can we bring in our guest at this time? Great. So we can bring in Mr. Eddy now. Mr. Eddy, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Let me begin by asking you, how common are building collapse or building accidents in the upscale area of Lagos, such as Ikoyi, where we have this 21-story building collapse that happened about 24 hours ago? And it is so sad, but yet we do not know why this came down, how it came down, or how many people were in it when it came down. What's your initial assessment?
Can you hear us? Eddy Atumonyogo, structural engineer, a former president of the Nigerian Institute of Structural Engineers. Can you hear us? Apparently he can hear us, so we will bring him in when he can hear us. We will continue with the rest of the stories on, okay, all right. While we are waiting for Eddy to come on board or to hear us, I was just telling you a story behind the scene, how Oshibono, who is supposed to be both the developer and the owner, as I gathered, has built quite some houses in America, I think in Canada and some other areas abroad, and then has gone to South Africa, Centurion or somewhere, highbrow areas, and has put up some fantastic structures. And then he came to Nigeria, and then, of course, it was supposed to be a 3. The 2 are still standing, but this one all caved in. So the question one would ask now, like you heard our correspondent there asking that man, and he said, of course, it was a question of cutting corners at the detriment of lives. So you wonder, why would you not do that in your country if that is found to be the case? Because, of course, the Lagos State government has set up both a probe panel and an investigative panel at the same time.
You know, there are so many questions to ask, but the point remains, every time we have such a disaster like this, there's an initial huffing and puffing by the government. Momentarily, we all mourn, the blame game continues, and then we forget about it until the next disaster happens.
I think we have him now.
You know, so it's been a recurring decimal. Mr. Eddy, can you hear us now?
I can hear you very well.
To you is, how common, you know, are building accidents or building collapse in the highbrow area of Lagos, such as Ikoyi? We know building collapse are not, or building accidents are not strangers, or these incidents are not strangers to Lagos State. But I mean, from your own professional experience, is it common to see high-rise buildings in Ikoyi coming down, such as we saw in this 21-story building incident?
Thank you very much. It's not really common to see high-rise building, come down in that neighborhood. Before you can see a collapse of some magnitude, there will have been some system collapse along the way. Nigerian structural engineers have been designing high-rises even before independence, and those buildings are still standing. You can see the 25-story Independence building, you can see the Net building, and you can see other medium-rise buildings on Broad Street. So there must have been some system failures, and these things have to be addressed. Nigerians need to imbibe that culture of compliance and respect for professionalism. Because before a building can collapse, several things will have gone wrong before it can now lead to such a colossal loss. Whole
21-story building, what you will call crashing like a pack of cards, Eddie. Buildings are designed to carry or support a particular load overloading, materials deterioration, what I call pancake effect, or design flaws. What caused or what could have caused this building to crash the way it did like a pack of cards?
Okay, I know that there are panels have been set up, both internally by Lagos State and some professional panels to look into and probe the actual cause of that collapse. But there are three different ways that buildings can collapse. You know, you have what you call punching failure, when the columns, or what people call the pillars, pierce through the foundations, and then the building can collapse. You also have what you call bearing failure, whereby the foundation just sinks into the soil because the soil has been overloaded. You also have what you call flexural failure, whereby the structural elements, either the columns or the beams, just give way because they're carrying more load than they have been designed to carry. And then if a column collapses, the load is transferred to the next column, and because that column has not been designed to carry both the columns of the column that have collapsed and its own columns, it will just collapse, and then there will be a domino effect, and the whole building will just come crashing down. But these things can be avoided if the right professionals are involved in the design of such structures. And there are a lot of good structural engineers in Nigeria who have been handling high rises and who continue to handle high rises. And people are encouraged to patronize such professionals and not cut corners.
The building agents in Lagos has just been suspended with immediate effect by the Lagos State Governor. That suspension is supposed to be indefinite. But do you think that is enough? Who should take responsibility for this catastrophe that will continue to record in Lagos, especially when buildings collapse and kill people? Is it the lax on government enforcement, or is it the professionals, as you said, in this instance, perhaps quacks taking over the jobs of professionals, or the developers? Who should we hold responsible?
If every one of these parties you have mentioned play their role properly, there will be no collapse. The developer, when you want to develop such a magnitude of structure, you have to get the right professionals. You get a structural engineer who now appoints a geotechnical engineer to do the soil test so that you know what the soil can carry. And then the trained structural engineer will now assess all the loads that the building is supposed to carry, and then now design the structures to be able to carry load. And it's very important that developers respect the opinions of their structural engineers, because some developers are very stubborn. They just want to have their way. And when they are advised to the contrary, they just, maybe they just sack the structural engineer and pick any other person that will do their bidding, which is very wrong. And secondly, we understand that this building at first was to be 15 floors, and then he got approval to build 21 floors. At what stage of development was that approval granted? Because there's no way a foundation for a 15-story building can carry a 21-story building. So at what stage was the approval reversed and revised for it to carry a 21-story building? Because if you want to carry a 21-story building, it means that the foundation has to be strengthened, and if the construction had gone past the state where the foundation can be strengthened, then there's no way the foundation of a 15-story building can carry that one of a 21-story building. So there are so many questions, and I believe that the probe panels will be able to find answers to some of these questions. But definitely,
would love to ask
there was a system.
Of course, you know that
somewhere.
one of the structural, in fact, the major structural consultant had to take his hands off that project. Sorry, we can't get that question across to you. Eddy Atumonyogo, former president, Nigerian Institute of Structural Engineers. Thank you so much for being on News Now.